What's up, Bittensor fam? It's Jeremy, aka School of Crypto, here with another Bittensor video for you. So I saw a tweet recently from the Bittensor founder, Const, and aka Jacob Reeves, and he had a really loaded tweet that I wanted to analyze. I actually wrote an article about it that was posted on Tau Daily earlier today, so I'll include that link down below for you guys. But so I just want to read this to you. All right, so he said Affine, which is his subnet, that's a reinforcement learning model subnet, which is number 3 overall in the emissions. So he said Affine uses compute from Liam, intends to train models for ridges. It derives inference from chutes and will run validators on Targon. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot of subnets that he's using for his own project. But then, wait, there's more. He had another tweet that said it will use storage from Hippias, run ENV's environments on Basilica, get insights from D-Search, fine-tune models from gradients, pre-train on Templar, which gets data from Data Universe. And I was like, whoa, let me unpack that a little bit, because that's a lot to really unpack. So anyways, before I get into that, just the whole environment in Bittensor as a subnet owner, you know, you're competing with the other subnet owners to get emissions. So at first glance, it might be sort of counterintuitive to really help out another subnet, because you're fighting for those emissions, you know, to fund your operation. So when I read all this, I was thinking to myself, wow, you know, like the founder of Bittensor is really pushing for subnets to utilize each other's products and services in order to not only grow their own project, but to also just help the ecosystem as a whole. So I really wanted to kind of break down this tweet for you guys and just kind of show what Const is doing and how unbelievable the interconnectivity of subnets really is, and how everybody can succeed while competing against one another at the same time. So let's start out with the first part. So Affine uses compute from Liam. So Liam is the number 1 GPU compute subnet on Bittensor, and it provides these, you know, trustless, secure GPU services that is better than any other of the centralized entities. So basically, in order for Affine to develop these models, they need this GPU compute in order to power them. So that's where that comes from. They need the GPU compute in order to power these reinforcement learning models and continue to allow them to grow. So that's the first part. Then we got the second part where he says they intend to train the models for ridges. So ridges is that AI coding agent project on Bittensor, currently number 2 in emissions. You know, they have this ambitious goal of competing with the Claude codes and, you know, Devin AI, all these AI coding agents that a bunch of these vibe coders are utilizing on a daily basis. So a lot of these models that they're using are large language models, and Affine differentiates itself with its reinforcement learning model in the sense that this is kind of a different way of looking at it. You know, large language models, they have these sequencer, you know, kind of like predictive type of capabilities, to where it's it's guessing what the next words are going to be. It's guessing what the next information is going to be. Whereas reinforcement learning takes kind of a different approach, kind of like a learning the world type of approach, kind of like a little bit more so kind of like how humans, tick. So basically when he says that he intends to train, models for ridges, that's really, shaking the boat in terms of putting ridges on another level and getting them to where it may be elevated over those centralized, Claudes and open AIs in terms of what they produce, because they're just using LLMs, whereas this would be using a reinforcement learning model as well. So kudos, to Const to, help another subnet out in terms of boosting their operations. And then we have the third part where they derive the inference from Shoots. So Shoots is the number one subnet. It's a serverless compute subnet, 85% cheaper than AWS, has 60 plus decentralized models on its platform. So basically, all the miners that create these reinforcement learning models for Affine needs to, host these models on Shoots in order to be qualified to be validated and to ultimately get incorporated to like their big brain, reinforcement learning model. So that's where that comes from. Says that he wants to run validators on Targon. So, he's got this whole reinforcement learning model on Affine, and ultimately, that can be utilized to help validate, different miners on Targon, which is another GPU compute subnet. That's top 5, top 7 subnet. So it'll basically have the capabilities in order to boost the level of productivity of Targon, the other GPU compute subnet, which is really cool. All right, next tweet. It will use storage from Hippias. This is a pretty simple one. So Hippias is kind of like Dropbox or Google Drive or, Microsoft OneDrive, where it's providing this digital storage service for, 40 to 400 actually to 2,000 times cheaper than all these centralized companies. So, a huge deal, state-of-the-art technology. The owner, Mog Machine, he basically created Tau Stats. He's been a validator for years, so this guy really knows what he's doing, really sharp. So that's kind of a no-brainer. Every subnet should use Hippias for storage, just for saving money and just the efficiency and everything. And then we got run environments on Basilica. So, basically, once Affine gets these models from the miners and kind of incorporate it into their own big model, they need to, run these on certain environments in order to particularly just, test them out and, see what needs to be done. And Basilica, offers that GPU compute, environment that allows Affine to be able to test these models out and to get them to where they need to be. So that's that part. Get insights from DSearch. So DSearch is one of a couple subnets that provides data scraping from a multitude of really, integral sources like Google, YouTube, X, other platforms. So, basically, Affine needs to continually, update its training sets and incorporate more information in order to, be able to enhance its reinforcement learning model. So ultimately, utilizing DSearch's, search engine and its intel, it's going to, make it smarter, make it more intelligent, and it's going to make the reinforcement learning model, ultimately, that much more enhanced. So that's where that comes from with DSearch. Fine-tune models from gradients. So, once Affine kind of goes through that whole process, the whole thing with fine-tuning is, you send your model to gradients. They have miners that go through this process where they're trying to make the model better. You know, they're fine-tuning it. They're looking for ways to make it more efficient, more smarter, more intelligent, right? Kind of like what they were doing with incorporating that D-search data, but this is kind of like more of like an AI, you know, type of approach in terms of like developing models in certain weights and all this other, you know, AI engineering type stuff. So that's where, you know, the kind of the fine tuning comes from. And then, you know, and then he kind of ended it from like, you know, he ended the tweet with pre-training on Templar, which derives its information from Dataverse. So, you know, the whole idea is to kind of develop your own model at first. And that's where the pre-training process comes into play. And that's what Templar does. And, you know, Templars are OG subnet owners for, you know, for the Bittensor ecosystem. And, you know, they're basically, you know, you can really, you know, start from scratch and have like a really kind of good foundation to start with Templar. And then, you know, they're getting a lot of their information from Data Universe, which is kind of similar to D-Search in the respect that they're scraping and mining places like Reddit, places like X, places like YouTube, and ultimately getting all the crucial data that will allow, you know, this foundational pre-trained model to, you know, to really thrive and shine. So right there, that's 10 subnets that Affine is using in order to, you know, make the most out of, you know, its whole operation. And it's just incredible to see, you know, what one subnet can take advantage of in terms of other projects in the ecosystem. So I'm hoping that this tweet and the article that I wrote and the community realizes that, you know, this is the way forward. You know, you have to be able to use other subnet services, which are state of the art. They're the cheapest in the world. They continually improve because based on the UMA consensus and the whole setup with the miners, you know, they're constantly going at it. They're constantly trying to better themselves. They're constantly trying to get emissions for themselves. So that kind of creates this like productivity flywheel that ultimately everything just starts to kind of level up as the days go on, as the months go on. So, you know, this is going to be huge in terms of just the interconnectivity of subnets, utilizing each other's services and helping themselves out, you know, while not worrying about having to compete with each other's admissions. So, so yeah, like that's kind of like the whole theme of this video is just kind of show you guys that, you know, the founder of Bittensor is really, you know, showing the way forward in terms of like how to take advantage of all these like really unbelievable evolutionary, you know, AI products and services, and how he's taking advantage of that and making his own reinforcement learning model better. So yeah, that's all I got for you today. I'll post some links down below on the article I wrote and throw my X account in there. And yeah, what do you guys think? Anything that pops out for you guys? Hope to see you soon, and always a pleasure, guys. See you.